Picture a dying man. Theaetetus, wounded in battle and burning with dysentery, is being carried from the field at Corinth. Someone nearby recalls that years ago, when this young man was still full of promise, Socrates had a long conversation with him. It was written down and preserved. Socrates thought very highly of Theaetetus. He predicted the boy would grow to be remarkable if he lived long enough. By the end of that recorded conversation, Socrates himself would walk to the chief magistrate's office to face the charges that would lead to his own execution. 2 deaths bookend a single dialogue about the nature of knowledge. Neither man ever found the answer. The greatest philosopher in the Western tradition spent his final hours pursuing a question he could not resolve. Plato insists this was not wasted time. His response spans 2 dialogues. One constructs an entire universe, the other dismantles everything we think we know about knowledge itself. Both arrive at the same radical conclusion. The examined life is not about reaching answers, it's about what the search does to your soul. Socrates declared that the unexamined life is not worth living. 2 of Plato's later dialogues illuminate what that declaration means in practice. The Timaeus examines the external world, its causes, its structure, its ultimate meaning. The Theaetetus turns inward, investigating the nature of knowledge itself, asking what it means to know anything at all. Together, they represent the complete philosophical life, looking outward toward nature and looking inward toward the soul. Plato holds that the external world exists purposively. It contains what the Greeks called telos, purpose, and goal. Nature is not a blind mechanism running on accident and necessity. It means something. And the inner world of the soul is not a passive receiver of sensory data. It's an active searcher after truth. Both directions of inquiry serve the same end, moral improvement. The examined life for Plato is not intellectual curiosity for its own sake. It's the discipline that makes a human being genuinely good. Plato never wrote a dialogue explicitly titled On Nature or on the Cosmos. The Timaeus is his closest approximation, and it arrives heavily veiled in myth and Pythagorean mathematical speculation. This is deliberate. Plato was not impressed with the knowability of the sensory world. His deepest philosophical commitment lay with the realm of mind, pure thought, and the eternal forms. Mathematics, not empirical observation, was his master discipline. The dramatic context reveals everything. The Timaeus is set the day after the conversation recorded in the Republic, and the epistemological framework established there, in which knowledge of the physical world ranks definitively below knowledge of mathematical and abstract objects, hangs over the entire dialogue. The best anyone can offer about the physical world is what Plato calls true opinion, a roughly correct story, persuasive and beautiful, but never genuine knowledge. This is why the Timaeus reads more like a sacred hymn than a scientific textbook. Plato wrote before modern natural science existed. From his vantage point, the achievements of Thales, Anaximander, Democritus, and Empedocles did not constitute secure knowledge. These thinkers had proposed bold theories about the fundamental nature of matter, water, the infinite atoms, the 4 roots, but their conclusions contradicted one another, and none could be verified with certainty. Socrates had always been more interested in the soul and human things than in external nature. Plato shared this orientation, but in his later work, he felt compelled to offer some account of the physical universe, not because physics mattered for its own sake, but because the wrong physics could prove genuinely dangerous to morality and political life. 2 terms need defining. Teleology is explanation by purpose rather than mechanism, asking why something exists, not merely how it works. Theodicy is a justification of the ways of God, an argument that the divine order of the world is good and rational. Plato's account of nature is both teleological and theological. He doesn't merely explain how the physical world is structured, He explains why a divine being would want it structured that way and why the arrangement is the best possible. All of his natural philosophy serves to legitimize a divine idea. He valued physics only insofar as it could help people improve their souls. This required a radical intervention. Plato needed to strip the mechanistic, arbitrary element from Greek physics, the idea that nature operates through blind collisions of atoms in a void, and replace it with purpose at every level of explanation. If nature has no purpose, then morality has no natural ground. Everything Plato cared about depended on nature meaning something. Enter the Demiurge, literally the divine craftsman, the creator god who made the world for a reason. Everything within this created world serves a purpose directed toward the good, because God possesses only good intentions. Plato's deeper aim is to reconcile two Greek concepts the Sophists had torn apart. Nomos, human law, moral convention, political order, and the phusis, nature itself. The Sophists argued that moral rules are merely conventional, artificial impositions by the powerful, with no basis in nature. Plato wants to demonstrate the opposite, that human ideas of right and wrong are genuinely natural when nature is properly understood. His entire physics exists to support the life of the soul and to protect morality from materialist attack. The universe did not arise by chance. The Demiurge decided, out of pure goodness and beneficence, to organize chaotic matter into a cosmos. The Greek word means an ordered, beautiful unity imbued with meaning. But here is the crucial qualification. God creates the universe because he is good, yet he does not create a perfect universe. Physical reality does not permit the perfection of the divine. The Demiurge makes the world as perfect as it can be, given the limitations of matter. And this accounts for why physical things come into being and pass away. Material reality approximates divine perfection, but never fully achieves it. Plato planned a sequel called the Critias, which would recount early Athens as a society resembling the ideal state of the Republic, a lost golden age echoing Hesiod's myth of successive decline. The Critias was never completed, perhaps because Plato found it impossible to bridge the gap between divine goodness in creation and the evident depravity of the present world. The main speaker of the dialogue is Timaeus, an astronomer. This is significant. Of all the natural sciences, Plato favored astronomy, the most celestial discipline, the furthest removed from mundane material reality, the one that gestures beyond the physical universe altogether. In the Phaedrus, Plato offers the image of the good soul rising to the very edge of the cosmos and glimpsing the eternal forms beyond space and time. The Greeks developed an early version of a periodic table, 4 fundamental elements: earth, air, fire, and water. Plato knew the work of Empedocles and Democritus, who were developing atomic theory. What Plato found valuable in Democritus was the idea that the smallest units of matter possess a geometric structure. In Plato's scheme, atoms take the form of the regular solids, now called the Platonic solids in his honor. Earth atoms are cubes, fire atoms are tetrahedra, 4-sided pyramids, air atoms are octahedra, 8-faced forms. Water atoms are icosahedra, 20-faced forms. And all of these solids are ultimately constructed from triangles, the simplest 2-dimensional geometric shape. From triangles, one builds squares. From squares, cubes. From triangles directly, every regular solid. The entire material universe reduces to geometry. The creator god in the Timaeus is the great mathematician, God as divine geometer. This follows necessarily from Plato's conviction that mathematics represents the most certain form of knowledge accessible to the human mind. A rational, beneficent God constructing a physical world would build it from geometry, the language of perfect certainty applied to spatial form. This image persisted for millennia. William Blake's famous illustration, The Ancient of Days, depicts God wielding a compass over the void. an image descending directly from the tradition Plato established. For Plato, to study mathematics is to approach the mind of the creator. To study the physical world with care is to read the geometric language in which the creator composed reality. The Timaeus gives us the universe. Now we turn to what Plato does with it, and to what happens when he shifts from building a cosmos to dismantling our certainties. After presenting his atomic theory, Plato moves through biology, chemistry, meteorology, and anatomy, offering teleological explanations for each phenomenon. A teleological explanation answers why something exists, not how it works. Modern physics restricts itself to how questions, describing the rate at which a body falls, 32 feet per second, without asking why bodies should fall at all. These purposive questions have been excluded from modern science as unproductive. In Plato's era, that distinction had not been drawn, and Plato would have rejected it on principle. Remember the cosmological setting? Plato inhabited a geocentric universe. The Copernican revolution lay 2,000 years in the future. Earth sits at the center of a cosmos designed by divine intelligence. If a physical explanation contradicted moral theory, Plato considered the physical explanation wrong. Consider the intestine. Plato explains the length and convolution of the human intestine by arguing that God designed it to slow digestion, thereby freeing time between meals for philosophical study. A creature with a very short gut, like a hummingbird, must eat constantly and has no leisure for contemplation. The long winding intestine is a divine gift to the philosophical animal, or consider the stars. A modern view might hold that celestial objects exist for no particular reason. For Plato, this is impious. The stars, moon, and the planets were placed in the sky to teach human beings mathematics. Without the regular spectacle of cycling seasons and alternating day and night, people would never have been prompted to develop mathematical thinking. The physical world exists to serve the intellectual and moral development of the soul. Students sometimes dismiss these explanations as primitive, and that misses the point entirely. Plato was not attempting modern empirical science. He was constructing a moral physics, making nature safe for ethics. The Timaeus concludes with an account of what happens to souls after death, a natural extension of its physics, since in Plato's era, no firm boundary separated theology from natural theory. This myth closely resembles the myth of in the Republic. Souls are immortal and cyclical, undergoing regular judgment and rebirth. The form of reincarnation depends on the quality of the life previously led. A soul that lived well ascends. A soul that lived badly descends, potentially into animal form. These ideas derive from Orphic and the Pythagorean precursors. The Orphic doctrines of reincarnation and the moral judgment appear to trace back ultimately to Vedic traditions in India. Over centuries, this wisdom likely traveled from the Indus River Valley through Mesopotamia and possibly Egypt into the Western Mediterranean. Plato inherited a tradition far older and far more geographically expansive than Greece itself. He took these inherited doctrines and gave them philosophical rigor, integrating them into a comprehensive account of nature, justice, and the moral structure of the cosmos. Contrast the Orphic tradition with the authentic Doric Greek heritage, the hero myths of Homer. In these stories, powerful warriors like Hector and Achilles perform extraordinary deeds. When they die, they remain dead. They are not judged, they do not return, no moral reckoning follows. Their glory is the memory of their deeds among the living. The Homeric myths represent the genuine Greek legacy rooted in northern Eurasian steppe cultures. The Orphic doctrines trace their origins to river valley civilizations thousands of miles to the east. Plato represents a syncretistic effort, a deliberate merging of the best elements of both traditions. Socrates functions as a hero in the mold of Achilles, but a hero of knowledge and wisdom rather than violence and death. And unlike Homer's heroes, Socrates insists upon moral order in the universe and the reality of inescapable moral judgment, something impossible within the Homeric framework where the gods are capricious and justice among mortals is uncertain at best. The reincarnation myth at the end of the Timaeus justifies universal moral order and universal justice. For Plato, this is the critical purpose of natural philosophy, a physical theory that drives human beings toward the good and virtuous life. Socrates and Plato regarded the new mechanistic physics of the atomists as morally corrosive, and the Timaeus was Plato's remedy, a protreptic, meaning an exhortation toward the good life disguised as a hymn to nature. At the dialogue's conclusion, the philosopher who has lived well might eventually be released from the cycle of birth and death, strikingly resonant with the Hindu concept of moksha, and the soul returns to the stars. If the Timaeus is Plato's hymn to the outer world, the Theaetetus is his interrogation of the inner one, and it is far less gentle from the external world to the internal. A person who seeks knowledge and virtue must first determine what she is. If one is a rational soul, one must investigate what one knows and how one knows it, subjecting every claim to rigorous scrutiny. The Theaetetus is a dialogue from the end of Plato's middle period. It is aporetic, meaning it leads to an aporia, an impasse with no definitive answer. But Theaetetus proves to be a capable partner in inquiry who makes genuine progress, even when he discovers only the boundaries of his own ignorance. The dramatic frame matters deeply. Theaetetus is dying when the dialogue opens. His teacher, Theodorus, is a mathematician, and this is significant because mathematics is the paradigm of genuine education in Platonic thought. Theaetetus's mathematical training makes him receptive to dialectic. Unlike Meno in the earlier dialogue, he has received a proper education and knows how to follow an argument. Theodorus praises Theaetetus as quick to learn but ugly and resembling Socrates. In the Greek world, where male beauty was highly valued, Socrates was famously unattractive. He looked like a satyr, yet he possessed a great soul. The distinction between soul and body is fundamental to everything Plato teaches. The physical resemblance signals the similarity of soul, both seekers of wisdom, both fated for early death. Socrates asks Theaetetus to define knowledge. Theaetetus first admits he does not know, and Socrates regards this as the most promising possible answer. Students who recognize their ignorance prove most educable. Those who think they already know resist the very process that could improve them. Then Theaetetus ventures his first attempt. Knowledge is sense perception. What we know is what we perceive through the senses. Socrates immediately connects this claim to the Sophist Protagoras. Man is the measure of all things. Socrates makes explicit that the foundation of Protagoras' relativism is the philosophy of Heraclitus, the doctrine that the entire world is in constant flux. Physics and sophistry link directly. Belief in a chaotic, ever-changing universe generates epistemic relativism. If nothing stays the same, no stable truth exists to be known. Then the devastating argument unfolds. Heraclitus said one cannot step into the same river twice because new waters are always flowing. But if universal flux is true, one cannot step into the same river once. The river has no stable identity at all. All nouns become illusory. River, air, clouds, and trees blur into indistinguishable processes. The world becomes what William James would later call a booming, buzzing confusion. If one person says the grass is green and another says red, both are equally correct and equally meaningless. Push the logic further. Protagoras' position leads to solipsism, the view that only one's own mind is certain to exist. If any assertion is equally valid, an object could simultaneously be a chariot, a podium, a vehicle, and a monument. This destroys both knowledge and language. The very act of naming, of fixing a thing in words, becomes incoherent. Socrates demonstrates that identifying knowledge with sense perception is self-contradictory. The first definition falls. Theaetetus' second proposal, knowledge is true judgment. In Greek, the word is doxa, opinion or judgment. Notice his progress. He now grasps the dialectical method and understands that Socrates requires an every and only essential definition. Not examples of knowledge, but the very essence of knowledge itself. Socrates refutes with a legal analogy. A skilled lawyer presents witnesses before a jury. A juror arrives at a true judgment about what happened. This defendant committed this crime based entirely on testimony, without ever being present at the events. The eyewitness possesses genuine knowledge. She saw the crime occur. The juror possesses only true opinion, derived secondhand. Both may hold the same true belief about what happened, yet their cognitive states differ fundamentally. True opinion and genuine knowledge are not the same thing. Knowledge requires the certainty that Platonic epistemology demands. The second definition fails. The most sophisticated attempt, knowledge is true judgment accompanied by a logos. The Greek word logos carries extraordinary range. It can mean speech, reason, rational account, or logical argument. Theaetetus proposes that knowledge is a true belief for which one can provide rational justification. This definition anticipates centuries of later philosophy, Russell's analysis of knowledge, Wittgenstein's engagement with the Theaetetus in his philosophical investigations, the modern standard of justified true belief, Socrates' fatal objection, the definition is circular and generates an infinite regress. If knowledge is true judgment supported by a logos, one must know that the supporting reason constitutes a valid logos, but knowing that presupposes precisely the knowledge one is trying to define, and asking how one knows that opens an infinite regress, each justification requiring its own justification without end. Knowledge turns out to be something architectonic. It stands above and encompasses all the distinctions we draw about assertions and their justifications. It cannot be captured by any formula that invokes knowledge in its own definition. The third definition falls. 3 attempts, 3 failures. 3 attempts at defining knowledge, 3 failures. But right in the middle of these failures, between the refutation of the first definition and the proposals of the second and third, Plato inserted what he calls a digression. It's an encomium, a formal speech of praise, celebrating the contemplative life over the active life of politics and commerce. Plato is too disciplined a writer to include anything without purpose. Here is the compelling interpretive possibility. The digression is the true center of the dialogue. The logical discussions lead to impasse. But the praise of the contemplative life delivers the real message. The practical, unexamined life is the true digression from what matters. The contemplative life is convergence on what human existence ought to be, the telos of the soul. Neither dialogue gives us final answers. The Timaeus offers a likely story about a designed cosmos. The Theaetetus reaches no conclusion about the nature of knowledge. Yet the epistemological discussion achieves something more important than a definition, the moral improvement of Theaetetus. He has been shown the limits of his ignorance. He has moved from mathematics to dialectic, the method for investigating justice, knowledge, and wisdom themselves. This mirrors the educational program of the Republic. Future philosopher kings are first grounded in mathematics and gymnastics, then gradually introduced to dialectic, the highest form of reasoning represented at the top of Plato's divided line. The Theaetetus illustrates this transition in real time, a student trained in mathematics ascending toward the highest reaches of knowledge. This is not a transmission of dogma. Students are not given Socratic answers. They are given the questions themselves. Students sometimes feel cheated that the Theaetetus reaches no conclusion. that the dialogue seems to waste their time. This reaction reveals the very assumption Plato wants to challenge. The point is not the destination, but the journey. Sincere, intelligent striving toward truth, even striving that ends in impasse, transforms the person who undertakes it. Through this striving, Theaetetus enlarges the domain of his consciousness while simultaneously and paradoxically enlarging the domain of his recognized ignorance. The more carefully he thinks, the more he recognizes what remains unknown. This humbling result characterizes every well-conducted Platonic dialogue, and this recognition of ignorance is itself a form of wisdom, the only form Socrates ever claimed to possess. The Theaetetus presents a young man who works diligently, reaches no conclusion, and emerges morally improved. The dialogue functions as what the Greeks called mimesis, representation or imitation of a good man morally improving others. It offers Greek culture a new kind of hero. Socrates embodies the good person doing good work, a hero not of the battlefield, but of the spirit. Theaetetus, as a subordinate hero who is already dying when the dialogue opens, shows how this new heroic tradition produces its next generation, heroes of intellect and spirit who are also, as Theaetetus' death in battle attests, heroes of action. The philosophical life does not produce cowards. It produces people who face death with open eyes. Contrast this with Homer. Achilles and Hector are heroes of violence. They win glory through combat and die without cosmic moral reckoning. The gods are indifferent to justice. Death is final. There is no return, no judgment, no moral order woven into the fabric of the universe. Plato's achievement is to unite the warrior hero with the moral sage, to create a figure who possesses Achilles' courage but directs it toward wisdom rather than destruction. Socrates is Achilles reimagined. He does not flee from death. He drinks the hemlock as calmly as Achilles faced Hector before the walls of Troy. But Socrates' courage serves truth, not personal honor, and his legacy is not a body count, but a tradition of inquiry that would transform the civilization that killed him. And this is Plato's syncretism brought to its culmination, the Homeric hero tradition fused with the Orphic vision of moral order and cosmic justice, producing a new idea of human excellence that the Western world has never entirely abandoned. Return to where we began. The Theaetetus ends with characteristic Platonic irony. Socrates announces he must leave. He cannot continue exploring the nature of knowledge because he must go to the chief archon's office to answer charges brought by Meletus and Anytus. He is cut off in mid-inquiry. He expresses the wish to continue the conversation the next day, but it will prove impossible. He is about to be accused of corrupting the youth and impiety against the gods of Athens. He too is about to die. Consider what Plato has constructed. The dialogue opens with the death of Theaetetus, a young man Socrates recognized as exceptionally promising, a student of mathematics ready for the higher reaches of philosophy, physically ugly and spiritually beautiful. And it closes by foreshadowing the death of Socrates himself, the man who made the examination of life his life's work. The philosopher is severed from his inquiry by the very city he sought to improve. Athens kills the man who tried hardest to make it wise. The two dialogues together, the Timaeus looking outward at the cosmos, the Theaetetus looking inward at the soul, form a complete picture of the examined life, and both end in the shadow of mortality. The search for truth does not exempt anyone from death. Plato never pretends otherwise, but the search changes the meaning of the life that precedes death. It transforms the searcher into something worth being. Neither the Timaeus nor the Theaetetus delivers a finished answer. One offers a likely story about a cosmos designed by a divine geometer, beautiful, purposive, but admittedly uncertain. The other dismantles every proposed definition of knowledge and ends in aporias, a productive, humbling, transformative impasse. Yet both dialogues demonstrate that the act of examination, looking outward at nature with wonder and inward at the soul with rigor, transforms the person who undertakes it. The search makes the searcher better. The questions themselves, pursued sincerely and without rest, constitute a form of life superior to any amount of unexamined comfort. That is the examined life, not a set of conclusions, but a practice, not a destination, but a way of being. Plato's radical claim, the claim that runs through both dialogues, connecting the divine geometer who built the cosmos to the dying philosopher who could not define knowledge, is that this practice alone makes human life worth living, and that the universe itself was fashioned by a good God so that creatures like us might pursue it.